This is the Palin Update on SaraNet Radio. I'm Kevin Scholla.
If the media had done their job, we would have known, despite Barack Obama really mocking the Clintons and condemning Hillary's healthcare plan, we would have known that his own plan was going to be based on an unconstitutional mandate that has resulted in these years of uncertainty and of agony.
Sarah Palin rails against the media and President Obama while praising online bloggers and reporters at the Right Online conference in Las Vegas. A Hillary Clinton supporter joins us to defend Sarah Palin. Anita Finlay, author of an eye-opening new book, is here. Plus, the governor offers prayers for Robin Roberts, a shout-out to the Army, and a message for Flag Day. This past week, Governor Palin thrilled the crowd at the Right Online conference in Sin City. Bloggers and online activists gathered Friday and Saturday in Las Vegas, and the Mama Grizzly delivered an entertaining, no-holds-barred speech. We'll look back at the governor's comments in just a moment. First, we're joined by Anita Finlay. If you're a soap fan, you may know Anita. She spent 7 years on The Young and the Restless as Dr. Nora Thompson. She's also worked on numerous network shows, including 24, Gilmore Girls, and Judging Amy. She's also been in several films and commercials and has thrived on stage in theater work. Now, her new book is making waves, a book she felt she just had to write after the poor treatment of women in the 2008 election, particularly the candidate she supported, Hillary Clinton. But there's also a chapter on Governor Palin, and Finlay points out just how sexism still runs rampant in politics. The book is Dirty Words on Clean Skin, and the woman who wrote it is here on the Palin Update. Anita Finlay, thanks for joining us here on SaraNet Radio.
My pleasure. Nice to talk to you.
You know, we don't have many Democrat Hillary supporters on the show, but your book is worth talking about. A whole chapter on Sarah Palin that I want to get into. But first off, you're proof that civility still exists. I know politically we may not agree on everything, or a lot of things for that matter, but I want to thank you first for standing up for Governor Palin.
Oh, it was my pleasure. You know something, obviously, in Dirty Words on Clean Skin, it's clear that I was and am a Hillary supporter, but this book really is meant to transcend partisan politics. And as you found out by reading it, my journey was kind of a transformation. And when Sarah Palin came on the scene, I realized I couldn't be a hypocrite and just defend a Democratic woman against misogyny and then let a Republican one put up with that sort of thing. I didn't think that was fair or correct. The point I'm making in the book is that we need to speak out against this no matter who the source is and no matter who the target.
You know, I've done the same thing when people go into the gutter against someone that I may not align with politically, but where's the human kindness, you ask? I mean, the attacks we've seen on Governor Palin, wishing death upon her, the sexist remarks, I think you answered it a little bit, but why did you find it necessary to bring her into your book? I mean, you could have still not bashed her and defended her, but because a lot of people, let's say, who may have hypothetically written this book if it weren't you, would maybe just focus on Hillary and gloss over the Palin treatment.
Because that wouldn't be fair. There's also a chapter on Michelle Obama, and while she didn't receive the same level of vitriol as the other two, she is still at the receiving end of sexist treatment via just the kind of careful treatment or careful handling she receives to make her seem somewhat reticent and put her in a sweater set, almost like a 50s mom. You know, because otherwise she's rather imposing and outspoken, and we don't want her to look threatening. And this is the kind of attitude. There's a shocking article that I just read in Daily Beast by Abigail Pesta talking about how men's opinions outnumber women by the ratio of 4 to 1 in news articles in a 6-month study they just did in print and on TV. And even when we're talking about women's issues, men's voices outnumber women's by 5 to 1. So when you're talking about who's controlling the narrative, the book really talks about, taking a look at who is in charge and how they denigrate a woman and why. So I can't just talk about Hillary. I have to talk about Sarah Palin. I'd be a hypocrite otherwise. For me, you're right. I could have just glossed over it, but that wouldn't have been right. So what I did was, there's a big chapter on her, as you point out, and I just go into, very specific detail about some of the things that were said about her and why that was untrue or why that was unfair. And as I'm sure you know better than I and your listeners do also, that last year there was a feeding frenzy getting a hold of 24,000 pages of her old emails while she was governor, and when they found out they really didn't have anything damning to report and that she was a hard-working executive, well, the exoneration was a lot quieter than the smear. And this was in the news for about a week, and it just dominated the news cycles as they were poring over all of these emails and really didn't find a smoking gun that they were looking for. So it wouldn't be fair of me to pretend that that didn't happen. And I can only pray that, by raising the debate in Dirty Words on Clean Skin, I would encourage conservatives and Democrats to sort of get together on this issue. I got a great compliment from somebody reading the book who said, you know what, this is a great book to read whether you liked Hillary or not, because it really makes the point of how, what the methodology is. And it is a first-person narrative, so you get to take the journey with me as an on-the-ground, in-the-trenches voter and discover how all of this plays out. I mean, I was shocked by all the research I did, and 315 footnotes later, I think the case is made.
It's funny you mentioned the emails with Governor Palin because, funny enough, a couple of my correspondents with her were in those emails and released publicly, and it was basically us talking about our children because Trig was born a month before my daughter, and it was, not only did she show leadership in all of her business emails, but all the personal ones, too, were just so normal that they didn't know what to do with it. And I do want to talk a lot more about Governor Palin, but I also want to talk about the Secretary of State here. Hillary Clinton wasn't treated kindly by the media in the 2008 primary. Chris Matthews and some of the MSNBC crew come to mind in particular. So enthralled and in love with Obama that they even went after the Clintons, who were really Democrat Party royalty. What did you find in writing this book? Why did they turn so drastically on Hillary, a woman they once were accused of catering to?
I think, well, they never catered to her. They always were cruel to her.
Or at least to her husband, at least to Bill Clinton.
But, yeah, never to her. I think part of it was that, for whatever reason, the party leadership felt that Barack Obama was the face they wanted to put on the spaghetti jar of whatever it was they were selling to the media and to the world. And I think that perhaps, I don't know, I think that some of the party elders like Nancy Pelosi or John Kerry felt that in an inexperienced neophyte president that they, who couldn't win a national election themselves, would be president by proxy. I mean, I don't know, because you have Harry Reid, who revealed in a 2009 book that in 2006, after Mr. Obama had only been in the Senate for 1 year, he was saying, you should run for president. I'm sorry, forgive me, and no disrespect intended to him, but I just think that that's sort of a preposterous thing to say. How in this difficult time in our nation's situation can you possibly say you're ready to run the free world and to be commander-in-chief of our armed forces? Where is your knowledge of foreign policy? Where is your understanding of the economy? Whereas there was such a exaggerated focus on Hillary's ankles and cackles and bourbon shots and bowling scores and vocal quality and strident and, shrewish and shrill and all the names, the filthy names she was called, I cannot say on the air because I don't wish to offend your listeners, but they didn't focus.
No, I know what you mean.
Well, look, even if you don't agree with her policies, people from far and wide were saying she had the best economic prescriptions, and that if you listen to her speak about the economy or getting the mortgage situation, the housing situation back in order, she had such a fabulous grasp on it. And the other thing that people ignored was that, as she put it, she apprenticed for 8 years in the White House. People took that remark in the wrong way, I think. What she was trying to say is that she was in the room with the most powerful decision maker in the world, and whether you particularly agree or not, we certainly had a balanced budget, and he was willing to work with Republicans, and we had 8 years of peace and prosperity. She understood who the players were domestically and the foreign powers, and I think that was something that we ignored. That was a value added that people didn't pay attention to. The mainstream media did not cover it. And I think, as British journalist Andrew Stephen wrote in an article in May of 2008, an unshackled, gloating sexism of the ugliest kind was unleashed by the media. And what I found most shocking was how this had been bubbling under the surface all this time. You know, I'm fortunate enough to have a wonderful husband and to have men in my life who are very supportive. And when I saw this unleashed by the media, I was just in shock. I think that the media, to answer your question, sort of fell in love with Barack Obama. Maybe they fell in love with the myth of him, but there's something deeper at work here. It also has to do with the fact that they said he would make history by being elected, as if the first woman after 43 men would not make history, would not make even greater history. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I mean, people try to say lip service, you know, talking when Governor Palin speaks about the glass ceiling and things of that nature, but it's very true. And your point, well taken, about Hillary Clinton being in the room, her decision-making and whatnot. I mean, who do you confide in more, you know, than a spouse? And a situation like that, I think Ann Romney has gone through a similar deal recently,
right.
You know, when she's been told that she hasn't worked a day in her life and these types of things. And again, against a woman, and they get away with it.
But isn't it interesting, and I'm glad you brought up Ann Romney here, because isn't it interesting that when Sarah Palin was running for vice president, she was condemned in the media for being bad mommy because she's not at home with the kids, she's running for office. But now that Ann Romney was making perhaps some inroads via her husband, they're, you know, obviously going for the women's vote and talking about how in the recession, when people were hired back, you know, it really disadvantaged women, and that women are really needing to get back into the workforce in greater numbers. And because she was making some inroads, then she was condemned as being a stay-at-home mom. So the working mommy is no good, the stay-at-home mommy is no good. The media narrative is flexible and adjustable, like the Goldilocks syndrome. It's too hot, it's too cold, but it's never just right.
Right, it just goes to whoever they're talking about. If it's someone who meets their political agenda, then being a mom or not being a mom's great, or what have you. The Palin chapter in the book, Anita, is called "She Who Must Not Be Named," a look at Sarah Palin. And it was really well written and spot on. You talk about something conservatives have been banging the drum on for years. So often groups like NOW or others, they quote-unquote are women's organizations and they claim to fight for women, but I think this touches on what we just mentioned. They really only fight for liberal women. And when something happens to a Palin or Michelle Bachmann, etc., they're mute. You say in your book that I could not join the daily lynching, and I think you talked about why you couldn't do that. Secondly, though, why have others not been able to resist ganging up on the governor?
Well, I think that she was very threatening. You have to also remember, and, you know, Julianne Moore, strangely enough, the actress who played her in that movie Game Change on HBO, she even admitted it. She said, look, we were terrified as Democrats that we were not going to be able to retake the White House because she was an electrifying presence. I think she summed it up in a nutshell. I think that's really what it is, because when she was first elected governor, if you remember in some of the news stories, she was rather a liberal darling at that time because she took on corruption in her own party and took on the big oil companies and won. So the media, and Newsweek actually wrote something nice about her that I point out, where they said that she was willing to reach across the aisle and work with Democrats and so on. So they were a little more friendly to her until she got in the way of the one, quote unquote. But Hillary Clinton got the same treatment. And in reference to, the only issue I take is that lately, you know, like the stuff that happened with Essie Cupp last week with Hustler magazine, with that horrible picture they doctored of, you know, putting a phallus in her mouth to punish her for her political views. That stuff is absolutely hateful. But, you know, I don't recall too many conservatives jumping up and down to decry the kind of treatment that Hillary was getting either.
No, you're right. No, you're right. Now, I was one of them. I can tell you that. But I will say, you know, the Essie Cupp situation, I've talked to so many people about it, and they said, oh, I didn't even hear about it. Could you imagine if it was a liberal journalist and they did the same thing? It would be the number one thing. Just like this pinata flap in South Carolina, Nikki Haley's face on a pinata bashed apart. If that were a different, someone of a different political stripes, could you imagine? But you mentioned here also in your book, you talked about how Sarah Palin was not portrayed properly and how she did often reach over to Democrats in Alaska. And, you know, it wasn't my way or the highway. runaway type of situation over
No.
there. You say she was painted, though, as a reactionary and a loony.
Yeah, constantly. The thing that was odd about that was that up until very recently with, President Obama's new declaration about his new comfort with gay marriage, up until then, during 2008, she and then Senator Biden and President Obama had the exact same position on gay marriage.
I think you're looking at my questions again. That's what I was going to say to you. Thanks.
Yeah,
Very hypocritical, though, right? I mean, she was the same. You want to say you're against her, fine, but you're voting for two men who have the same stance.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Look, the bottom line is that if you're going to take a woman down, you don't like her, you don't think she's worthy of support, God bless you. Do what you got to do, but be honest and stick with the issues. Let's leave the personal out of it. I just read some silly article last year where Sarah Palin and her family were attending a barbecue, and it must have been 95-degree weather, and in the second paragraph, they talked about her open-toed sandals and her red toenails. Wink, wink. What is that supposed to be referring to?
Yeah, of course.
Will you please tell me what that has to do?
And,
or David Letterman with the slutty flight attendant look.
Oh, the list goes on and on. The pictures in the magazines that, meantime, a lot of the times, when the jogging outfit, the time with the sweater, I mean, she's wearing what most American women wear, and I think that's why a lot of people like her, the normalcy.
Right. Well, but by the same token, now look at what's going on with Hillary Clinton and the skyrocketing popularity that she is enjoying. It's up in the high 60s, and one of the things that happened were these wonderful texts from the Tumblr ads that came out showing her looking very cool, texting information from the seat of her G6. You had Barack Obama laying prone on a couch saying, "Hey, Hill, what you doing?" And her answer is, "Running the world." And it just said, look how she is like post-Uber cool. But think about how wonderful it is and also how sad it is that something like that will increase her popularity more than someone looking at the sum total of the fight that she has made for women's issues and for women's rights, even getting cook stoves for women around the world to stop them being poisoned, to fight for women to stop being used as a prize of rape after war. I mean, this woman has done so many things for the American people for the past 40 years that went unreported because it was much more important for David Letterman to talk about her pantsuits or her ass size. And the same thing for Sarah Palin with the slutty flight attendant look and so on. And, I sincerely hope, I wrote Dirty Words on Clean Skin, and I took a risk by writing it, frankly. I've worked as an actor for a long time and live in Hollywood. And I wrote it because this has to stop. I really believe that we as an American people are better than this, and that we don't want to raise our children to believe, no matter what your politics are, that you should talk about women in this way. And this is not about women superseding men. We're in a co-ed universe, and we're all here to work together. But I think that we empower each other by respecting the specific skill set each one of us brings to the table. So I really hope that people will, reach out regardless of politics and take a look at the book, and I think you'll be refreshed and surprised by what you find. And you'll also be shocked to discover it's kind of a touchstone in a way to dissect the media tactics so that when this stuff happens again, and it will, then maybe people are quicker on the draw to stop it from happening.
Well, you do a super job highlighting the hypocrisy. They say about Sarah Palin, she only ran Alaska, but you mentioned when Howard Dean was running Vermont, a very small state, that wasn't an issue. You defended her Russia comments that were totally taken out of context, and in fact, you can see Russia from parts of Alaska, and you also defend her on the whole wardrobe flack that we spoke about in depth here. But really deeper here, you think the treatment of Palin and Hillary Clinton, it becomes a gender thing, and it really does, and it's unbelievable to vote for people on color or on sex. It's amazing. Anita, another thing I wanted to touch on quickly here is, a lot of people say that this president has broken up more friendships and families than any politician ever. It's amazing that it would come to that. I mean, I know probably just like me, you have friends of all political thought. I do.
Yes.
But you've had some run-ins with friends over that 2008 cycle?
Yes, absolutely. absolutely. And I haven't lost any close friends over it because we value each other more than that. But there are certain people that I don't talk with anymore because they made a dividing line. What I think is kind of odd is that you would trust a politician who is being handled and being conducted as large theater,
who you've probably never met.
You never met. You don't know him from a hole in the wall. You're only believing media hype over somebody you know to be a sane, sober, and reliable person for years. And this kind of thing, I don't know, what the psychology is there. That's really not the focus of the book, but it did happen, and it's something I did discover. And the other thing I discovered, too, in my 500 get-out-the-vote phone calls on behalf of Hillary was that I spoke with people in 10 different states around the country. I spoke with people of all political stripe, and I had many things in common with them. And I just felt that we have to stop denigrating each other as, Hollywood isn't the, wacky lefty loonies, and the people who are out in Appalachia are not, we're not hillbillies. I mean, you can't talk about these are the flyover people and these are the, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't like this name calling. I found that it's useless, but I think that even out in the blogosphere and in the media, we still tend to have dividing lines. And that was the biggest education that the book discusses, is that those dividing lines are meant to keep otherwise like-minded people apart. It advantages politicians who want to fill their coffers by stoking your fears. And it really is not something that's going to help us to grow our economy or to grow and have, equal rights or anything like that. So I think that Dirty Words on Clean Skin addresses all of that and attacks the topic of sexism and media bias from a lot of different angles for that reason.
I think you touched on in the book a little bit. I took it at least from one of your chapters, and I heard this from a Tea Party person too, so you could see how people on different ends of the spectrum can agree on this perhaps. Palin's had problems not just with the left. There's a lot of establishment Republicans who do not like her at all. Or, even worse, sat on their hands when the insults came down.
They did that with Hillary, too, on her side. Exactly, because these people are threatening.
Right.
These women are threatening because they might actually work for the American people.
And beyond that, though, do you think some of them, too, are just flat out, is there a jealousy of sorts because, say, a Sarah Palin seemingly has it all and can juggle it all and do it all? Does it transcend just political policy sometimes, too? Here's a married family woman who's been a governor and a vice presidential candidate.
Possibly, absolutely. Yeah. You know what? The sour grapes may be on the part of men, too, and other women, that she has managed to create the career that she has. And I'm sorry, you don't get where she got by being a moron.
They said,
I may not agree with her on certain things, but
course.
you cannot get there by being thin as tissue paper. You can't. It's not possible, especially not for a woman.
They say the Nixon-Kennedy debate or the election would have went a whole lot different if that thing was only on the radio and not on television. You wonder if you had all these people, Hillary, Obama, Sarah, put them all on a piece of paper and say, here's where they stand, here's their record, and see where things really would come out without all of this other stuff that people, for whatever reason, use and vote on. It's amazing. We're hoping things get better, of course, but Dirty Words on Clean Skin, it is worth the read. Anita, I got to tell you, I was only going to read the Palin chapter because that's what I wanted to talk about, but you sucked me in. I read it cover to cover.
Oh, wow.
And
great.
I enjoyed your take on things. And again, thanks for being honest, and best of luck with the book. I guess it's available everywhere?
It's available right now it's available on Amazon.com. You can also get it at Barnes & Noble's, but primarily on Amazon right now and Kindle, and it's available in print and, obviously ebook editions. You can also go to my website, www.anitafinlay.com, or look up Dirty Words on Clean Skin, and you'll find it. But thank you so much for your kind words. I'm so glad you enjoyed the book, and it's a pleasure to have a chance to talk with you.
Wonderful, Anita. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Dirty Words on Clean Skin, a must-read. Check out AnitaFinlay.com to get your copy. That's Anita Finlay, Finlay.com. A thrilling Friday night for conservative bloggers in Las Vegas. Governor Palin spoke for over a half hour to the Right Online conference. She honored the memory of Andrew Breitbart and also spoke highly of Matt Drudge and Rush Limbaugh. She praised bloggers for standing up for what's right and reminded them that our nation can no longer afford partisan apathy. And, of course, the Mama Grizzly came out, teeth, claws, and all. Palin slammed the press, and she recapped how the lamestream media did not do its job in 2008.
During that campaign, the same media that reported breathlessly about a minor candidate, an irrelevant candidate's wardrobe, couldn't be bothered with the future leader of the Free World's associations, his pals, his voting record as a state senator, the statements that he had made in the past.
Palin went on to say if the media had done its job, we would know Obama does not believe the U.S. is exceptional. And we would also know about his horrible approach toward energy that's predicated on foreign dictators. She blasted Obama for his war on religion and his Marxist and socialist ties. She wondered why the media cared more about Todd Palin being an independent than they cared about Obama's socialist thoughts. In that classic Palin style, she made strong points laced with folksy language and humor. She asked why the media couldn't afford a trip to Chicago to vet Obama, but they were creeping around Wasilla around the clock. She says at the very least, they could have read Obama's autobiography to find out exactly what he was smoking, snorting, or eating. And Palin mentioned some possible Obama cuisine by name, Fido and Rufus. A reference, of course, to Obama's admission that he ate dog. Palin also mentioned the big Scott Walker victory in Wisconsin, and she looked back at her visit to the Badger State and the Capitol in 2011 with Andrew Breitbart at an Americans for Prosperity rally in support of Walker's proposals to end collective bargaining. Overall, though, the speech in the ballroom of the Venetian Hotel rallied conservative bloggers.
And we will do whatever it takes to defend those truths. We will defeat that Goliath of the old media that still seeks to deceive this most exceptional nation. So don't retreat. Reload with that inspiration.
The governor also thanked our brave military members and reminded us that soldiers die for freedom of the press. The least the press could do is be fair. Another home run of a speech for Sarah Palin. Broadcaster Robin Roberts is undergoing treatment for a rare blood and bone marrow disorder. Governor Palin asked for prayers for Roberts this past week, saying she's a fighter, a good and fair broadcaster, and even a recent inductee into the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. Palin added, if anyone can beat this, she can. Our prayers are with her. Flag Day 2012 was this past week, and Governor Palin wished everyone a happy one through Twitter, and she also wished a happy birthday to the U.S. Army, which turned 237 on Flag Day. Incidentally, my Flag Day was wonderful. I had the chance to visit the Betsy Ross House and the Constitution Center, and I'd like to thank both venues for their hospitality. So proud to be an American, and visiting those places really just enhances that pride in our exceptional country. Folks, remember, you can follow us on Twitter at SarahNet Radio, and we're now on Facebook, too, so please like SarahNet Radio on Facebook. Well, that'll just about do it for this edition of the Palin Update on SarahNet Radio. Visit SarahNetRadio.net for continuing coverage of Governor Palin. I want to thank everyone here at SarahNet Radio. Thanks to Anita Finlay. And thank you for listening today. Please be sure to join us next time for another edition of the Palin Update. I'm Kevin Scholla. Have a pleasant day.